بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض من عليها وأنت خير الوارثين وتتعلم وتعليم وتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة حث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. So, you're stuck with me today to cover for Sheikh Nabil, inshallah. I'll start with a benefit and then we'll move on to something else. I'll start by talking about certain chapters in the Quran that are recommended to recite daily, every single day. And then we'll move on to something else, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم روحي واخاكم ندخو الله لبايتي صافتا شبكة تبا شقوق فوجي فائدة زالة وشئياتو كتبا شو نحل الزوم سحد قرآن آياتاتو موي يقرو زال ما فائدة شبو زالاتو إن شاء الله تعالى باينا شو لما كتبا شو نحل إن شاء الله.
Okay, so the first thing, the most obvious thing to mention that should be recited on a daily basis is obviously the Mu'awwidhat, which is Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Al-Falaq, and Surah Al-Nas, 3 times each. Sabahan wa masa'an, early in the day, around dawn and a little after, and wa masa'an, and in the evening. So this is one thing that everyone should make sure to recite on a daily basis. And this is something the Prophet himself, alayhi wa alayhi salatu wasalam, used to recite on a daily basis. It's an indication for protection. It's a cause for protection. So this is the first thing, and I'll elaborate more after the translation.
ما حري إيش تسورات وقالوا لنا يم صبحي صلاة بحر وازوك الصو مغرب قر يقروا زال انت يم حرزي خنزالي كير حزال انت سوء بجيح شربه الزوم سورة الإخلاص قل هو الله أحد شيش تقر إلى آخر زو الزوك الصو قل أعوذ برب الفلق شيش تقر إلى آخر زو الزوك الصو قل أعوذ برب الناس إيش إشتي سوراتو قرأوا نار قر بجيح شي بكير حزال انت بايو لكنه مداوم وش دائم يقروا زال انت رسول زي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم يقروا الناروي يو الشيش تقر صوزوا مشيت بايتين.
The Prophet used to recite many things for protection at one point in time. And then when these chapters were revealed to him, these 3 chapters, the final 3 chapters of the Quran, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. When they were revealed, the hadith mentions that the Prophet would just recite these chapters for protection, and he left the other things that he used to recite. And in the hadith, the Prophet said that these 3 chapters, if read 3 times each, in the morning and in the evening, it's enough to protect you from any harm. So the Muslim should not be negligent in reciting these 3 chapters, morning and evening.
ما رسول زي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم يش اشتي سوراج إما يورد بيو اسبلبلاتي كروز الشياش ناريو لكنه يش اشتي سوراج زي وردو اللي بحروخ يش اشتي ومقرأ قالوا بايت انت صوزوا مشيت الشيش تقر ما يش اشتي سوراج بجيح شي بيكر حلوي هي لبايتي يشي ودقاني لا يتخيشو ميل باو من لزال بفائدة ما يكير حبازال شياش فز بجيح شياش انت يوما يشي بأسو والدي روح زو يكير حتخيش البايتي انت رسول زي عليه الصلاة والسلام ذات لمدنا ما بجيح فائدة ذا البانتاما إنيام الزيو نتختل ما فائدة زو نرخ بكت دائم وشح البنا بايتي انت.
So these can be a cause to protect you from things like sorcery, sihr. It could be a cause as protection from the evil eye, ayn. And there's a hadith of the Prophet said that the thing that kills the people from his nation more than anything is the evil eye, is ayn. So people don't take ayn seriously, the evil eye. Its harm is true. The Prophet said, al-aynu haqq, the evil eye is true and it's a real thing. And so many times, ayn could afflict someone in something light, something easy, meaning you don't realize, you don't think it's a very serious harm. And it could affect you in a way that's very serious that could result in death. Sometimes out of the blue, someone is perfectly healthy. All of a sudden, they catch some type of an illness, and it leads to their death. A lot of times, it's ayn. Doctors have no explanation as to what happened or why it happened. Many times, it's because of the evil eye. It's because of ayn. So there's one reason why you should, recite these 3 chapters in the morning and in the evening for protection, because the harm that falls on a person, it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, and you can't explain why things are happening, but it's because you weren't protected. So this is the most important thing to recite daily.
حريي شيش تسوراج بجيحش بكر حالو بايو يكرح بوزال شاش ما بين بحزو سحري انت سو ولدي سحري ياش بالي فركم لي ويكرزا لسبه يكرح البا انت سحري به ازوك السوزو وسو إن بهم يكرح الويشي ما وسو إن بجيح وسو أخذ زمان به يسحد سو يعني كأنما زي الكت ياش ذا الحل لكنه الموقع زي الزياج رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام إن حق انت بايو يتئن يسحد سو دررته سات إن حلتي الزيخ حلو بي درر موش تفرك ذات انت بايو رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام ما أبزح أمته بيوي يعني أمتي أبزح درر أشاما متتايدوك أشازال يأسو إن انت بايو ما إيلي كأنما حتشي مزلتا كنت من حيجة تخشمل نوك أما انت كرح باكو تمن تخشال مقرأة تخشال بايت انت يأسو إن بيم أسو والدي وكرح البايت انت خزمان بتوك وزاخو كتا بجيح كرا يكوزال نتو ليدا وانت يلزال شيبه مرمرة شوميو غنيا خلزال شيبه يعني سويا يترغزال ما من لي كتخانا بايتي وأمام ببيان موش زي فرقو شي يقومل الزوي نش إياش بجيه كروخم بازال إين بحث لحدا يخلين فرقال بايتي الله يكرهنا.
Just for your information, the way the evil eye occurs is someone looks at someone else with a feeling of, let's say, a bad feeling. It could be hatred, it could be envy, hasad, where they wish this person didn't have that thing and they wish they had it instead. And then they say something. So it's a bad feeling of jealousy or hatred or something, a negative feeling in their heart. And then they say something. Maybe they're jealous about your car, so they say nice car, for instance. That's a very nice car. Or maybe they're jealous because you're handsome or you're beautiful, so they say, oh, you look nice today, But in their heart, isn't pure. There's a jealousy or there's a hatred. There's a negative feeling that they have. So they have a negative feeling, and then they say something while they have that feeling. These are the 2 things that must occur. A bad feeling and a word must be uttered. They must say something. If that happens, then the evil eye could occur. Sometimes the shayateen can see that the ayn is taking place, and they can make it even worse. So the 2 things that happen, there's a bad feeling, and then someone says something without mentioning the name of Allah. If they said MashaAllah, for instance, they would have been protected. But they just, they have that bad feeling and they make a comment about that thing. Nice car, you look nice today. Really they're jealous. They wish they had your car, and they wish they were prettier than you, for instance, because they're jealous. So that's how the evil eye takes place.
ما حريي إن درش بزال كتمين أنت وسوزو بزال إنيت زو التانم حستي إن بزي حاجة ساعة الزو أسو هو أب حاجة وما الزو بحر حد شي بايقر انت بايو خونا زال درر زو بدوك إلى زال سبي لكن أحدثو أين حك دي بلاي حستي بلاي بايو ما لكن بسم الله تانم ما شاء الله بايت الله سموك قلب ونارجر يسا الزو درر زو يبرد بامل سبي سبب زوم يخنتي ويتنافذ نصيب زو يتنافذ بازال يخن يقسي خنتي بالدرر موشا ويتنافذ بازال شيطان حست زون تبعتي انت ما زو شيطان درر بردال هو أبا حق دي داوا حست زال بأبا ومكينة خاكم سال مثال زول باو قر وأما مكينة حلق وايراس خوجك وما سبيخ باو نارقر لكنه استوزو بيخ هو أبا من اللي مكينة نبريو اللي نبرنجس ما جبايت بي استوزو بحق دي حلبة حست حلبة كينيت حلبة يي أنا زخانة ما لسينا نساء شيطان الزوب ودرش حلبة انت لكنه بسم الله ما شاء الله مكينة خاكم سباو نارقر هو أبا در شيطان در برد بمه من اللي الله سبحانه كلام بيتين ما إلى كل زنام عملنا شاما يعني نميح ريتخيس الشيء من انت أبوا هاي سنة بأور شيرنا نارجر جزمان زنا أور خنينت الزوك الصوزو الله سبحانه كيكلي انت من السن يساخ شيطان دررزو برد من البيت السب الله يكرهنا.
So, if someone makes a comment about your car, maybe you have a new, I don't know, a new Lexus or something, and someone says, nice car, but they're jealous of you. So then all of a sudden you're driving and then you get a flat tire, for instance, or maybe you're driving and then all of a sudden your brand new car with its new engine, something happens and the car is not driving straight or whatever. So things like that, a harm all of a sudden just falls on this thing that they had that feeling about and they said something about. So this is one way it can occur. It can occur in your belongings, something you own, like your car, and it could happen in yourself. Someone might make a comment about you, and something bad could happen to you. So it's not a condition that the ayn happens intentionally by the one who's doing it. It's not a condition that someone wants to harm you and harms you on purpose. If there's a bad feeling and they say something, it can happen. So someone could happen from a Muslim to another Muslim. They look at someone, they're jealous, they say, nice, blah, blah, blah. So then something happens. It's not a condition that this person did it on purpose. Some people can do it on purpose. They know that they have the ability to do that. I'll mention a story about that after. But it's not a condition that it happens intentionally. Someone might do it by accident, but they should have mentioned the name of Allah for protection. They should have said, MashaAllah, So anytime you want to admire someone else or something that they have, always say MashaAllah first. Always say MashaAllah first.
حريي إن درر بردا زالبايو سحد جرسو زو زلاك في مخنا الوي بايتي زو يسين نظر سنانو واي مكينة خاكم سالي لالي فركال أزو بحر اللي تكشوك مما مكينة زو قلت قوم منيد بحل قلتا مالت قبل المكينة يي أين كنتي سحد جرخنا البايو لكن كوش مخنا زالبانا كل شيء الله فرد وقرته خنا يي بتقوش حلبنا أزو بحر يشي خوي يكزالو مخلي فركال سحد أبزح جرخ زي زلاك مخلي فركال لكنه استوزو بزال شي كينيت التانم حسد بحمس زخانة ساد رزو زي دال بيتين لكن أبا سحلو بأور شيري أما الله سمك كلنا رجر بسم الله ما شاء الله يشي قرام انت قوم سبخ زوجتو يمكن قرام انت بام أور شي بيتك الله اسمي كلنا رجر دررزو بالله يكره حلباتين الله يكره.
So some people can do it on purpose. So there's a story of one man who was able to do it on purpose. And he told someone who was with him, he said, look at that camel over there. There was a huge camel near them. So the guy looked at the camel, like, okay. And then the camel fell over and died immediately. So the person looked at the camel with an evil intention, and he said something, and the camel fell over and died instantly. So some people have the power to do it intentionally and on purpose. So, yeah, that's possible.
ما تحدث هاج حلو بايو إنزي وتاخذ لاج مع مثال ست واحد بايو أحد مرين زوي قاملاو حاجة بايوي وخل ما قدر قامل النار ما زو قاملاو حاجة واحد من الخانم الزو قاملاو حاجة وما أحد شيء سننا الزو قاملا ودك أما موتوي وقت نزو سبحان الله.
So there's a hadith about it. There were two companions one time, and one of them had exposed his leg for something. And the other companion looked at his leg and he made a comment about how nice it looked without mentioning the name of Allah. So when he made the comment, the other person lost consciousness immediately. Immediately, it just became unconscious. And so the word got back to the Prophet, alayhi wa salatu wasalam. They told the Prophet about it. So the Prophet said, why would one of you harm his brother? Right? Why would you not mention the name of Allah? Right? As a protection to prevent that from happening. So the Prophet said explicitly, why would one of you harm his brother? Right? So by admiring someone and making this comment, again, with the condition that there's a bad feeling inside. If the intention is pure, if someone is not jealous at all and they say nice car, they just mean nice car, then it wouldn't happen. There must be a bad feeling, and then they say something. So this companion, there's a feeling of maybe jealousy or something, and then he made the comment, and so the harm took place. So the Prophet said, "Why would one of you harm his brother? Why would you not mention the name of Allah?" So always, if you want to compliment someone, mention the name of Allah first. I know someone who told me one time that he was eating at work. And someone told him while he was eating, he's like, you have nice teeth. So then while he was eating, the next bite he took, he cracked his tooth on something that he ate. Right? So, mashallah, who can.
ما هي حد الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام صحابي زيو إنجر زيو كفتو بي أزو بحرق الله صحابي وإنجر خكم سال بايت بيوي أسينا نوبا أزو صاحيوي ققبا خانوي أتحاري خبر زو رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام دك بايو دك باي ليو ما أزيوم من اللي حد زو أبوح زو درر شال بايت بي أي مدو بايت انتم بايت زيوم ما شاء الله بايت بسم الله ما شاء الله بايت نار بيو البايت زو بحو درب ورد بيو يلا ملا بوح زو بيخدر برد البايت بي أتلي مدو بايت قويا شو ملا زوت الله شا بايت لي ما يزال شي انت بايو.
And it is possible to give yourself ayn. You can give yourself the evil eye. How? If you're prideful and you look at yourself, or you're prideful and you look at one of your belongings and you say something. So if you're prideful and you feel superior because you have a nice car and you say, I have a nice car, something could happen to your car. Or if you think, you're pretty, or you think you're handsome, and you're looking in the mirror and you go, or you say something, I don't know what somebody would say. It'd be weird to just say, I'm pretty, but it could happen. So if someone says that, it's possible that they can harm themselves with the evil eye. So you should say, MashaAllah first. So if you want to praise your car, say, MashaAllah, I have a nice car. Or if you want to praise the way you look, after, spending 30 minutes on your face, say, MashaAllah, I have a nice face. You shouldn't feel that way in the first place. You should have some humility. But if you're going to say something, say, MashaAllah first.
الزوك السو ولدي روح زوم إيم بدرش لفركا البايو إيم سو ملمانك اسي يعني متفاخر بح مسا أمام مكينة حلن يلزال خانة نارجر مكينة زو حاجة ما مكينة زو أدنك ما أسينانا نارجر الله سمو ميكيكلي يا مكينة زو بحشي برد باي فركا البايو الزوك زو روح زوم قام زو يحجما في سو يحجما الزو بحر ليخ يعني روح زو يبوا أبيو نارجر عجبي بو أبيو ما روح زو مدنك أين بي أحد شي أسينا نارجر الله سمو إميكيكلي روح زو مدرج لفركال بايو روح قادو يول لفركال يسول دي يعني إم بلاي ولحل روح زو يول لفركال يزي خانسا متكرهت خشال بايت ندي كل جرام يزال شي بي الله زاش بي نعمة انت بايتي وكتب موشمه الله لحمد مقبا ما روح مصبرة خشال ما روح مترع كل جرام خسارة زايد انتاما روح مصبر ما روح يعني كوش نسو روح زو سؤاك انا رقر يعني ايشوت باللي ما يحل مزايكت روح زو مصبر زو بسو ولدي فايدة شال بايت انت الله يلحمنا.
There are indications in the Quran, there's a story that implies that, of someone who gave ayn to himself and he harmed himself. It's a story actually that I mentioned back in December. We did that little dawrah thing, the story in Surah Al-Kahf. So Allah tells us in Surah Al-Kahf that there are two men. One of them had a huge garden. So Allah tells us, وَدَخَلَ جَنَّتَهُ وَهُوَ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ قَالَ مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. So that one of them, he entered his garden, وَهُوَ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ, and he was unjust to himself. The Mufassirun said his injustice was the fact that he had pride and he was ungrateful to Allah. So he was praising himself and his belongings without realizing and declaring that Allah gave it to him. So that was his injustice. And he said, مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. He said, I don't think that this garden that I have will ever perish. Like I'll just have it, forever and ever. It's always going to be here. مَا أَظُنُّ أَن تَبِيدَ هَذِهِ أَبَدًا. So that's what he said.
ما زوك الصوزو يي قرآن بذكرى ذكر أبام وي من ما نكسر روح زو يعني تتراز نار تروح زو ما حرش ناريو روح زو هو درر زاشا مزيد لما انتبايو يي حرش اخوي دائم تورزات مسلمين تتمسات مسلمين من الزو بايت التابور دوي.
That wasn't his only problem. He disbelieved in Judgment Day. He says, وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً وَلَئِن رُدِدتُّ إِلَى رَبِّي لَأَجِدَنَّ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا مُنْقَلَبًا. He said, and I don't think Judgment Day will occur. So he had a number of issues. One of them was he was prideful about what he had. And also he disbelieved in Judgment Day, which of course is disbelief.
الزوك السوي أباخ يمتبه ملتبيكوا جيشا ماج آخرة من برتزوم خداء بايتين ده كفر بودك الله بمجنوه يي أين خسارة بزودك النار الزوب كوتاني على خطأ الزوم كفر ببوأوي الله بمجنوه.
So his friend or his companion responded to him and he told him قال له صاحبه وهو يحابره أكفرت بالذي خلقك من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم سواك رجلا. Said, have you disbelieved in he who created you from dust, the origin of Adam alayhi salam, and then from a sperm drop, and then proportioned you as a man? So he questioned his disbelief. And then he said, لكن هو الله ربي ولا أشرك بربي أحدا. So as for me, he is Allah, my Lord, and I do not associate anyone with him as a Lord. So his friend reprimands him for his disbelief in Allah because he denied Judgment Day.
ما حري صاحب زخ من اللحل اللهم أخاخو زلنار خبزة ريخ بيخ ما يقل موخ أفربي أو دنيا آدم استخلق أفربي أنت أزو بحر لأخوي مني بزي خلق إخ يتتكشو مراكز كتسيت مي بزي خلق إخ قوي تابيخ يعني دلح خمان كفرق بايو يعني أزو يعني قصوص بيك إكرا لينتيكو سايو آن موخ بايو يعني هاخ موخ يكت بي زخلق إخ أصوت زتواوي إخ موصو زاشخ مزخلق إخ قوي تابين كفرق إلاما أزو قصوص بيك إكاليو أزو بحر آنوي أحد الله بين أني كفر ميخ شركم أش دبل ميخ باي مع زو روح زو الإيمان زو ثبات بايتين.
So the point I'm making here is giving yourself the evil eye and mentioning the name of Allah to protect yourself. So this person, he walks into his garden وهو ظالم لنفسه, with a feeling of pride and ungratefulness, and he says, ما أظن أن تبيد هذه أبدا. I don't think this garden will ever cease to exist. It's going to be here forever. So you have a bad feeling of pride وهو ظالم لنفسه, and he says something, ما أظن أن تبيد هذه أبدا. So the two conditions are met. He has a bad feeling and he says something. What does his friend say to him? ولولا إذ دخلت جنتك قلت ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله. His friend tells him, why don't you say when you enter your garden, ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله? Why don't you say, this is what Allah has willed, and there is no power except the power of Allah, meaning Allah is the one who gives ability. لا قوة إلا بالله. Why don't you say that? So he's advising him that you could harm yourself.
حرية صاحب زخ من اللحل يعني رخة وتدل مكاسي حرش غزيبو خساء ما شاء الله من اللي خلاقك وي الله من اللي كتب لاشخي الله من اللي حمد لك بخي قوة زالة مفراك وصالة كل شيء يشاور زالة حد الله وانت بايتي بخ من اللي الله كتب لاشخي بايتي بي زقالة شو بايتين.
So then what happens? A few verses later, وأحيط بثمره فأصبح يقلب كفيه على ما أنفق فيها وهي خاوية على عروشها ويقول يا ليتني لم أشرك بربي أحدا. So then what happens is Allah sent a fire to surround his garden and burned the whole thing. So his entire garden is burned. Then he comes to his garden, he sees everything has been destroyed, and he's, he feels remorseful over all the effort he spent and put into it, and then he feels bad and says, if only I had not associated any partner with my Lord. So now he feels remorse. So the point is, there's a number of issues here. One was the fact that he disbelieved in Judgment Day and disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the only God who creates. But the fact that he had a prideful feeling and he said something about it without mentioning God as like istithna, as an exception to say that Allah is the one who creates this thing. So he harmed himself. He had a feeling, he said something, Allah destroys his garden. So
ما هو بحري يي قصص بالوت صوبخ يعني الله قدر ما تبيجا وقتات صوصتي وبيتين تاي من خانة الزحر شزو تما قد ما قنيا زلنار كنت خانة ندي زايو من النار هي حشي توارات ولم تلزاس مسلمين من البايت بتفاخر النار لكن الزوس الزحر شزو تما قد ما حمد خانتي ما قنيا يسا مناشا سيناشا الله بمزن كفر زو بايت بي سينا موشفون بو أبايت انت ترى ايو حاشي فراكو سليلا كلكم القدرة زالة أحد الله زتانت ترى ايو مبو عليو بايت انت.
So it's a good story to humble yourself. Don't ever feel proud over what you've done. If you do a good job at work, or you've saved a whole bunch of money, or maybe it's something noble like you've raised good kids or something. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't ever feel too prideful, because as the verse says later on, "Al-walayatu lillahi al-haq." True authority belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Authority is His, and whatever you have is a gift from Him, and He can take that gift back from you whenever He wills. So never forget that. Everything. So for the Muslim, for the mu'min, for the believer, everything goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, the non-Muslims, one of the things that they notice about Muslims, and sometimes they'll joke about it, is the fact that everything for the Muslim is insha'Allah and masha'Allah. Everything is if God wills, and this is what God has willed. It's insha'Allah about everything. If God willed, this is what Allah willed. Something good happens to you, it's what Allah willed. Something bad happens, it's qadarullah. So it's known about Muslims from other faiths. Christians, Jews, they all know this about Muslims, that Muslims always refer everything back to Allah. This is something good to be known for, and that's how it should be. So don't ever feel too prideful about what you think you've done, because as Allah says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. Allah is the one who does. Allah is the one who creates your actions. He creates all of your actions. Whatever you have is what He gave you. Whatever you do is what He enabled you to do. So, we should all be, we should humble ourselves and be conscious of that. Inshallah.
ما يحري مسلم تلز انت بايو الله بايقر بايتيم كل شيء ويزملك سالم أحد الله انت بايتيما يعني زتام الله انت ينسالم الله انت بايتيما إقرار موشة مسلم حال انت بايو حري مسلم زلتاياج إذا حد قر مسك آشالو بايو مسلماج إن شاء الله تلالو أزوهر لما شاء الله تلالو بايتي بي يعني هي أساس انت الله باقر ولا حشي مخنمل الله زلا وشي مخنمل الله زي خشوي تخنال الناش ما جيزم زنا ما مخشى زنا الله مشيات حي بنت زال إنياتشم نتميلا كازانام الله ملك زون تابايتي قافي موقع حلبة بايت انت ولدك أنا علي ونارقر حدثو أزوك الصوت دينت جيزو الله أواسع علي ونارقر يي ولداش صوم دينة جيزهم الله تتملك يزال يي لبايتي حمدي مقبأ بلاي متفاخرت خشم البايت انت إني متفاخر مسلم حال التام يي لبايتي أزو متفاخر بروحه من حادث خشال الله يعني تحي نسو يكزل كش نسي وتكزل نفسي وش أنا زي وكنت انتامة الله يحمي.
I all of that to say that you should read Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas 3 times each in the morning and evening for protection. That's how I got into all that. So it helps for protection against ayn and hasad and all of these, and sihr and these things. So take it very seriously. Recite Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas 3 times in the morning each, and 3 times in the evening each for protection. Because harm is real, whether or not you see it or perceive it. The harm is real. So this is the first thing I wanted to mention on the different surah, different chapters of the Quran you should read every day. So Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, An-Nas 3 times each for protection, morning and evening. Yeah, it serves as protection, yeah, against sorcery, from the evil eye, and also from, of course, I forgot to mention, I don't know how, jinn, right? Jinn. Jinn cause harm to people often. And if you recite these things, the jinn won't be able to harm you. They'll be prevented from being able to harm you. So that's another thing to keep in mind, of course.
ما حري خلاصة زبايو صوزا شيش تقر سورة الإخلاص وشيش تقر سورة الناس وأزوكس سورة الفلق مقراءة خشنة حلبة قل هو الله أحد قل أعوذ برب الفلق قل أعوذ برب الناس الشيش تقر كوصوم صوزا ومشت آدنا شت قشالوي من ليشي وسئم بيمك إرحنا حل سحر بيمك إرحنا حل جناج كيد زيوا شر زيوا إرحنا حل بيت جنوم بجي حسول دي درنا شال الزاهد درر زي بيم يقرأنا رجر الله يكره حل بيت انت يك حرزي انت يكره حزال انت يي لبايتي فجر صلاة السجدو بحر لشيش تقر يوم اقرأ أزوك الصوزو مغرب السجدو بحر لشيش تقر مقرأ وقام وشبهت انت إنجاش الفايدة زو بجيح انت.
You can spend a long time talking about things to read, during the time of tahsin and stuff. But I want to summarize it and just talk about certain chapters in the Quran that should be read daily. So we'll just mention that. The least you should do is that. There's A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammat, there's Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ard. There's a bunch of stuff, but what the Prophet always did was these 3 chapters every single day, alayhi wa salatu wasalam, morning and evening. So this is a must for the conscious Muslim.
ألا ياش وزالا شوم حلو باي فايدة بجيح زداج أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات مقرأ الباج إلى آخر زو زوك بسم الله الذي لا يضر الزو شيش تقر موشام بجيه فايدة حلبة لكنه أقل به يشيش تي سوراجو الشيش تقر مقرأ ورسو زو محدق البنام بايو من اللي يشي بزال بفايدة وسيوك نبرقر ذا القراب وحلف سلا شيء محد كلام ما يلي مقرأ حلبنا الله يلحمنا.
So that's the first thing. Another thing that should be recited daily is Surah Al-Mulk. It's taken from a number of hadith and the practice of Muslims for multiple generations, that if Surah Al-Mulk is recited daily at night meaning after Maghrib and before Subh, right? So anytime at night between sunset and dawn, if it is read every single day consistently, that it is a cause to protect one from being punished in the grave. So reciting Surah Al-Mulk every single day at night, specifically at night, is a cause for protection against the tortures and the punishment in the grave, right? So this means if there is someone who's a fasiq, even a major sinner, if he has this habit of reciting Surah Al-Mulk every single day and he never misses it, it's hope for him that because of its secrets, he'll be protected from the torture in the grave, right? So this is something to take, of course, very seriously.
زوك الزوزو سورة الملك يوميا مقرأ مغرب بحرلي يم بجيح فايدة زال بانتا عذاب القبر بهم قافي وكرها حلبايو يم ملمانا كسي نشيحني بيتخيش سال شي انت سبب زوم حوجي سو ولدي حال زوم كنت انتاوي كومي ما إسا حدثوا خطب زودك خانا قرزوزو يو مقرأ زوبي يعني الله يكره حلبايو عذاب القبر مع عذاب القبر بمسلته سو ولدي لقدير نعمة انت سبب زوم الزوب زال أسرار بجيح انتاما عذاب القبر بسلته سو قيشا مسلتهم يعني تكبزال انتاما إلي الزو مقرأ في زبيت خشال باي الله يلحمنا.
So after Maghrib, before Subh, Surah Al-Mulk every single day. So that's one of the chapters, the entire chapter from start to finish, 2.5 pages, 30 verses. Something that should be taken, that you should be careful to do every single day. Another surah that should be read every single day that you all know is Surah Yasin. So many Muslims, I'm going to mention 4 specific chapters. Those of you who were in my class last week know what these 4 chapters are. But I'll mention 4 specific chapters in the Quran that many Muslims in the world have taken as a habit because of a number of hadith to recite every single day. Every day. So Surah Al-Mulk is one. Yasin is another one. No specific time during the day, but to spread it out, you can read it in the morning because most of them are at night time. So to spread things out, Yasin you can read in the morning. So you don't feel like you have a whole bunch to read at night. So Yasin is another one. And the one hadith, the Prophet called Yasin the heart of the Quran, Qalb al-Quran. And in another hadith, the Prophet said, Yasin lima quri'a lah, that Yasin is what is serves whatever it is recited for. So if you read Yasin with a particular intention for something to happen or for you to be protected from something, then Yasin is a cause for that to be fulfilled. So if you want something to happen, read Yasin with the intention that inshallah this will be fulfilled. It's also something that you can read if you lost something. There was one person who said he lost his luggage one time. It was very important. He had a whole bunch of very important things in it. It was like at the airport or at a bus terminal. He lost his luggage. So he said that night he read Yasin like the whole night. He just kept on reading Yasin. And then the next day he went to the terminal and he just found his bag sitting there in the middle of the hall. So Yasin is important.
الزوك السوزو سورة ياسينهم بجيح فايدة زالبان تبايو ما ياسين وخ بجيح مسلمات عادة زاشون تبايو مقرأ ياسين ما تبارك بعد بمنوك أزانكت ما أحد أسي بس في هذا الخانق مالتو مقرأ لفرق البايو ياسينو تبارك وقت زون مغربوا فجر ما بين أورت مشيت انتبايتين ما الزو مقرأ بيخوي بجيح فايدة حلبة بايو رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام ياسين وذكر أول شيء اللي انتبهوا حدثوا ينتهز الخانة قرأتانهم أحد حاجة طبيق خانة بيو نارقر الزو حاجة زو لبايتي قرأ ونارقر حاجة زو كمل لحل بايو أحد مثال ستنا أحد أبا مسافر زي تشان تزو تتمس بيو قبته أتحاري من عشا قارز قباسا مشيت تمام ياسين وقرزال الحدرة صوز حفا مع الزو تبنال جحارسا الزو قارقتي بقنيو مشيت موزي قبته سبحان الله ما هي لباتي بجيح سر حلبا مع الزوم مقرأ زو فايدة حلبا باي الله يلحمنا.
Ameen. So that's number 2. So you have Mulk, that's one. Yasin is another one. Another one is Surah Al-Sajdah. It's 3 pages long. It's also 30 verses. Doesn't take too long. I don't recall what the benefit is. But there are hadith that do indicate that the Prophet used to read Surah Al-Sajdah every night. So Surah Al-Sajdah is another one you should have a habit of reading every night. So night again means after Maghrib and before Subh. I don't know what the benefit is, but it's also a common practice in many Muslim countries to read a sajda every single day. If you, some of these dua booklets, like, Mukh al-Ibadah, some of these famous dua books, a lot of them open the, because they're books of like awrad and adhkar and things you say every day or every week or whatever. So usually they start with things from the Quran specifically, different chapters that are known to be read often. You will always find Surah Al-Sajdah in that collection. There's about 7 to 10 different chapters in the Quran you see usually in these collections. Yasin is always there, Mulk is always there, As-Sajda is always there. So this is also something you should make a habit to read every single day. It's only 3 pages, and it should be read at night.
الزوكسو سورة السجدام مقرأ زو بجيح فايدة حلبا بايو ما فايدة ما بين ب يعني ينتبايتي بكتباش زخ علم بايو ما الزوم لكن بجيح فايدة حلبا قرأو نارقر بجيح أوراداش بهم الزوبح مسيد دابل زال زتال بايتي الزوبين بجيح فايدة حلبا بايو.
And so that's 3. The 4th one, as a complete chapter that should be read, is Surah Al-Waqi'ah. That should be read also every single day. This one, the benefit is known. Al-Waqi'ah, and there's a weak hadith that supports this, that Al-Waqi'ah should be read at night also, and that whoever reads it every day at night will be protected from poverty. They'll never be poor. So Al-Waqi'ah is known for its benefits in rizq, for sustenance. So Al-Waqi'ah every day as a cause for someone to be protected from being faqir, from being poor.
الزوكسو سورة الواقعة بجيح فائدة زالبانتا الزوم وسوء بفقري وخطر الباتين وسوء والدي ومسك يعني رزق زو يزك حلاكوت فقري تعب زيو شاكوتا يقرأ أنا رقر فائدة زو زايدين تباتين رزق زو الله يكفت لحل باتين الله يلحمنا.
So we'll mention the story of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, you all know, is one of the great companions of the Prophet, alayhi wa salatu wassalam. He's one of the 10 that was guaranteed paradise in a single hadith. He lived the longest out of those 10. He outlived all of them. So after the 4 Khulafa died, he outlives all of them into the Khilafah of Muawiyah. He lived a very long life. He lived for a very long time, mashallah. But during the Prophet's life, he felt very, very sick, and it was thought that he was going to pass away from how sick he was. He was extremely ill. There are multiple times in his life, actually, where he had extreme illnesses and extreme sicknesses. Once, actually, during one of the wars, I think in the Khilafah of Umar ibn al-Khattab, if I recall correctly, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was made a commander of the army. And during the war, Sa'ad was extremely sick. He was so sick that he couldn't stand, he couldn't sit, he couldn't lean on his side, he couldn't even lean on his back. He had to lie on his stomach. I don't know what kind of sickness causes that to someone, but that's how sick he was. He couldn't stand, sit, lean on his side, or on his back. He had to lean on his stomach. Despite that, he refused to abandon his position as the commander of the army. So he told the people, carry me to an elevated surface on the battlefield. So the people carried him, and on the battlefield, they put him on an elevated area where he laid on his stomach. And so he stayed there, and he was commanding the Muslims from that position, telling them what to do, receiving news and advising, what they should do or if they should keep on going. It came to a point where the battle was so intense that the Muslims were kept on retreating to the point that Sa'd was in danger of being captured by the enemy. He never retreats. He never says, get me out of here. He stays there, fulfills his command as the commander, and he keeps giving advice. They were successful. They won the battle, alhamdulillah. But so this is an example of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. There's one hadith where the Prophet said, who's going to guard me this night? Imam Muslim reports this, where he said, who's going to guard me tonight? Who's going to serve as my bodyguard this night? Because sometimes the Prophet had to be guarded. It might have been before the revelation of the verse, فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ, or another verse in the Quran. There's at one point the Prophet used to have guards around him, and then Allah revealed a verse where Allah tells him that Allah will protect him. So then the Prophet told the companions regarding him, I don't need you anymore. Allah has given me his protection. So he told them, I'll leave. So maybe it was before this verse. In any case, he asks, who's going to guard me tonight? So then the companions heard a sword being drawn. Shing! They just heard someone drawing a sword. So they looked around, and there was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. He took his sword out, said, I'll guard you, inshallah. So then he said he guarded the Prophet that night, and the hadith says that the Prophet slept very comfortably that night. MashaAllah. So, we'll go to the translation.
ما حري حيو عشرة المبشرين ما بين بهم حزو زيتيو سعد بن أبي وقاص حيو قدير صحابي انتيو ما التزيوم الله عمر بزشالة انتيو كل صحاباش يعني الزيوب أحمد الساعة عشرة المبشرين حرد خليفاش زمان بهم إلى ومعاوية زمانهم الله عمر زيتيو مزنبر وانتيو ما يتزيوخ فز ب كوش وناق النارو ما حد قر عمر بن الخطاب زمان بي مسلم البايو أزو زمان بي إيقادا شو نارا حربي يليتو إيقادنت بيليتو كتا ما أزو حربي ميدان بيسالو قدا لقوش النارو التزيوزون دبام لقوش النارو يموتا اللي انقورو يزولت نارو لكن الله عمر ستأيو ما تحاري أزو حربي بإيقادنت ستأيو سامي خانو أموسيو يزي ستأيو التايو الحدقو أموسيو يقرا خلايو إناوا من تطون به متقبلهم مكانهم كشكش بايتيم المفرق درجة تايب وردو كرسي منيت بلا يحشي موش وركم النارو إنا زال بحجنا طونيوا إنا من تطون به الزو أين بخونت بسالو قد من بايو حفزي تايبه كرسي أين يوجما الزوكت بي قد نت بلي تخبايو حرب ما هي أين بي حرب بيسالو قد أحد قرك اللي قد وقفوا المسلمات أحد قروق تقوفوا نارك الحر ما أزيو يلحدوا يلدوك زي بوردو نارا أداواج لكن خيم أزيو يعني نكليكم على شيء كوش النار الزو أين بي أزيو ثبتوا ما الزيو جيش الزيو الله نصر ستيو ما قوف ما الله إماجو كت آشيو باتنت يأينا كوش وزن زناري والنار بان تحيي صحابي رضي الله عنه.
So there's a connection between Sa'd radiallahu anhu, and Surah Al-Waqi'ah, which I'm going to get to. But I want to mention one more story about Sa'ad that I really like. One thing that was known about him, because the Prophet made dua for him, was Allah said, Allahumma ajib da'watah. Right? Oh Allah, accept his dua, answer his dua. So Sa'ad was known for as being someone whose dua was always accepted. There are multiple stories about this throughout the hadith of Sa'ad making dua for something and that thing happening. So it got to a point where he became famous as a man whose dua is always accepted. People knew that about him. So some people would, ask for dua, and some people were afraid of his dua in case it afflicted them if they did something wrong. And there's several hadith where he made dua against people because they were doing something wrong, and immediately that dua would come true. One time somebody was cursing Imam Ali, for instance. So Sa'ad makes dua and he says, Oh Allah, if this man is insulting one of your awliya, one of your saints, then show us the signs of your power. Right? So Allah, if this person is insulting one of your awliya, Imam Ali, which he is, he said, Ya Allah, show us a sign. So when the man was cursing Imam Ali, he was sitting on a horse or a mule. He was sitting on something. As soon as Sa'ad finished making his dua, the horse bucked, it kicked the person off, the guy's head hit a boulder, cracked, and he died instantly. So his dua was to be feared if you weren't careful.
ما حري هيو سعد بن أبي وقاص بجح سورة الواقع بحت لحزالهم حليو أزوك سو حدقر نسا قبضة بمزر صخو رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام حوج ما نخكر حنيا البايو سعد سيف زيو مسسو مقام بايو ما تحاري ساعة زو يا ما تشوي رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام أوركو تتمشاكي ومقلب حد بن يوبايو ما حري الزوك الصوزو رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام دعاء زاشلونا روحيو صحابي دعاء زو الله يتقبل لي يكت دعاء زي والله يتقبل لي يكت رسول دعاء شلو يي سبب بيخ دعاء زو مقبولنت بزتا وقخان ما أسو آكيو دعاء زاشلوم فاجا زو يرخبال حبار زاشوم وقتن زو جزا زو غنيان يي أين بزتا وقو نارو تحارو سو أحد قربو سو دعاء زي يفاج نارا أحد قربو سو حبار زي يفر نارا درار برد زالسو حبار زي يفر نارا بايتين ما يحري أحد قرمي خانا أحد أبا إمام علي ومسادة بيقلا زي خانا فرس التبقى لأينا تجيبالا ما أزيو سادبال أتعري حيو سموسا يا رب ولي خابي برد زي بورد خانا قرحو أبا قدرة خوازو بأورا نبايو الزو دعازو يحيل دوا يا زي جبال بأوري شفا ما قلبته حناس سو دش بزالون دخاشو ما أتازو بموت ما هي أين به بجح تتكاكلا شيء على زيو قصة زيو به دعاء زيو مقبول زنارنت.
So one of my favorite stories. So Sa'ad lived around the rule of Bani Umayyah when they started, and many of the governors and those who used to give speeches, many of them were unjust and sinful. As you can tell, this man was cursing Imam Ali, so he made dua against them. So one time there was a man who was giving a speech from Bani Umayyah, and as he's giving the speech, one of the things that happened during the rule of the Umayyads was the misappropriation of Muslim funds. So there would be funds that were dedicated for the benefit of the Muslims, for the welfare of Muslims, and the Umayyads would take it and they would spend it on themselves, spend it on their family members, which is of course a major sin. So one of them, he's giving a speech and he was saying, this money is our money. We can do with this money whatever we want. Nobody can stop us. It's ours and you can't do anything about it. So as he was saying that, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was present. So he started to raise his hands. As he was raising his hands, the man who was giving the speech saw him raise his hands. So he said, no, the money is the money of Allah. We only spend it the way Allah willed for it to be and accept for it to be spent. And he immediately retracted the statement. So Sa'ad lowered his hands. He didn't make dua against them.
ما تحاري من خانا حد زمان به بني عمياج زمان نبروز عمر الله سطيو ما قدور نبرو نار ما إحريس حد ما بينا بيقزنا راج عدلي بيقزوم النار مسلم دينته روح زيوا أحلاس بويلو نار ما تحاري يبم ما نولينت بوا بيوما يي دينت سنانتا أحد سميم ربالي فركمل زخش نوكت بالناش تصرفنا شبحنا بايت بأسننا خطبة مسؤول لي مدزال قدان الزود سابحر له من رال حيو صعد إجزي وكحف سايو سايرال الزوز راسه فتم لا يدينت الله دين الصونته دين السناملته حق خوزال حق خوز خل نزال نست أزانا تبعه فتم بناوت أسنانه أزوس أجزي أزيو أردوي يا أنا بي أزيو يجي يروح فتم بناوت يبايت يقال سبب زوم من تختلانيو له ما هي مزيت وقت النار تبايت أزيو من نص النار أكو يوما أزو بحر لخ كل زوم أدب زيو جزنار بايتين تزيو دعاء زيو زي أحبار زيو زيجنيا.
Yeah, so that's just to understand who Sa'd was, basically. So the connection with him is Surah Al-Waqi'ah. One time Sa'd was very, very sick during the Prophet's lifetime, before the Hijrah, I believe. Excuse me. So when the Prophet was when Sa'd was very sick, he thought he was going to pass away. He thought he was going to die from this illness. So he asked the Prophet if he could take all of the money he has, all of his wealth. He had 2 daughters, Sa'd. He asked the Prophet if he could take all of his money and give all of it to charity. If he could leave a will, a wasiyah, and dedicate all of his money to charity, right? He has 2 daughters. He can't do that. But he asked the Prophet, can I just take all of my money and give all of it in charity? The Prophet said, no, you can't do that.
ما حري صعد تاريخ زي بحد لحد ذا الشيء دي لنا حلقة من ترخبة حد وقت حد قرزا ليزولي ليزينته كل زوم صدقة مستخشو لكنه قوت كحتاج ناريو يسا الزجاج كحتاج يعني حاجة خنبوزال التزيم حاجة خنبوزال دينة جيز تانتاما كل زو ستوقر منو لالو يزي خنكوتا لا كل زو مستايل خنبايتي بي رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام امديوري.
So then Sa'ad said, okay, what about 2/3? 66% approximately. What about 2/3 of my money? Can I give 2/3 of my money in charity? Can I, leave a will saying I want 2/3 of my money given in charity? The Prophet said, no, you can't give 2/3. It's too much.
تحاري حايب بايو شيش تجي لك كوت جزء تقرخ بايو بقلب ستنا سدست إجبايتين أزوس لا أزوم بجيح أنت أزو كله مستفركم أخبايو.
So then he's persistent. He said, okay, fine. What about 1/3? Can I give 1/3? The Prophet said, الثلث والثلث كثير. He said, okay, 1/3, but he said even 1/3 is a lot. It's excessive. But he said 1/3 is allowed. And then the Prophet said, for you to leave something for your dependents, for your family, is better than leaving them with nothing and then begging people for money afterwards. So you leave something for your family so that they can, fulfill their own needs. So he said, الثلث والثلث كثير. 1/3, and even that's excessive.
الزو شيش تجي لحد يزوم بجيح أنت لكنه من بايو حتفيو أخوي زالخو تستمى ولداج خاوي توكسو كتاشا يوم وصفي تكان بحلفوي ولداج خالي تحد قلا يوما يتخيش يزو المخشز يو يعني يتوطبو كتموشا خان يتونيا البايو يوم استمع ولداج خا كركري يعني صدقة توكس مصفي تكانو به حدخل يقرن ما جالوي وصفي تزيكانو كتا ما زو شيش تجي لحد يزوزو بجيح انت بايو.
So just so you know, the Shafi'is use this hadith to say if someone is leaving a will, a wasiyah, the maximum that they can specify in the will is 1/3. You cannot leave a will saying, okay, all my money is to be used for this or that or the other thing. You can't do that. If you do that, only 1/3 is executed. 1/3 is the maximum you can use for your will to, distribute your wealth. The rest has to go to the inheritors. The first thing that happens is debts are paid off when someone passes away. Number one is debts and the kafan, what they need for the shroud, and debts. Then it goes to the inheritors. If there's a will, the will is executed, but only up to 1/3. The rest has to go to the inheritors. So 1/3 is the maximum for the wasiyah, for the will, in the Shafi'i school, based on this hadith.
ما حري إي حديث أساس موشبه شافعي مذهب علماء من بايو أحدثوا وصية موشة خشنا رجل زموت خصاء دينته ويكأس زو صدق ستو التان ويكأس زو كتو شبايا ما وصية موشة خشنا رجل شيش تجزوله أحد يجزو متي وتفرقال بايو الزو كأس ياشوما يوخ ما تشين تاشو زال ندي لكي حل باقر زو لكي حتكفلال الزو لكي حزو استكفلا ما الزو بحر لخام زي موت أبا يتخش هذا الشيء حل كفن زوا على شيء الزوم استكفل بحرله شيش تيجي لأحد جزو الزو وسيا زو شوتوا شلوما ذكرى يعني مراث ساشلي يورسي زالاش ورا شاشلي حرال باتين هي أساس شافعي مذهبات يو قولتو.
So one time, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas was asked, if he passes away, isn't he worried about his daughters and leaving them in poverty? All to get to this story. So at one point they asked him, maybe it was at the end of his life, they asked him, are you worried about your daughters? So Sa'ad said, no, I'm not worried about them because I taught them Surah Al-Waqi'ah. So I taught them to recite Surah Al-Waqi'ah at night, and this will protect them from poverty. So I'm not worried about my daughters at all.
أتحاري قديرسو زخانو زمان بأتحبريو وسيا أشخي مدينتها وألا أسل يعني مسكين لست وباخي محيلتها أنا رقر حري ولداش ممكن تخنالو ولداش خالق تحس بلايو ميخي بايو متحبريو ولداش وسورة الواقع أنا لما تخيوي حاجة ملتايو مسكينة تقنيو ميل بايت بيو جوابا شو باي.
Yeah. So Al-Waqi'ah is one of the chapters recited at night also. So these are the 4 chapters that should be read in full every single day. You know, it should be as a good habit to build. Yasin, you can read it in the morning. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole bunch at night. Al-Mulk at night. Al-Sajda at night. And Al-Waqi'ah. The hadith, which is da'if, says at night. Some ulama and awliya read it at Asr time before Maghrib for a reason that they have. So you have that option. You can read it at Asr time before the sun has set. If you have motivation, you can read it at Asr and at Maghrib if you want. But so yeah, Yasin in the morning, Waqa, Asr or Maghrib time. The hadith says after Maghrib. As-Sajda and Al-Mulk. These are 4 chapters that you should have the habit of reading every day, inshallah.
ما موي يقرو ما عادة شوية خيس البايو ياسين وصوزا قرأ أنا رقر الواقعة عصر بحر لحساد أولياء شم بايو سحد علماء شم مغرب بحر لبايو السجدوا سورة الملك مغرب بحر لمشيت قرأ حل بايتين ما شيش تزوم مشيت مكرمة ياسين وصوزا مكرمة فركال بايتين.
And the last thing I'll mention before I wrap up, that should be read daily, is the last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, Aman al-Rasulu, to the end. And this is mentioned in a hadith that is authentic. The Prophet said, whoever recites the last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah at night, he said, kafatahu, it's enough for him. And that's all he said. So then the question is, well, what does that mean? What is it enough for? So there are 2 opinions that are mentioned in the books of explanation of hadith. Some said it means, yakfihi, it's enough for him from the evil or the harm of the night. So if you read these 2 verses at night, it'll protect you from any harm that might occur at night. So you'll be protected from that. This is one interpretation. The other interpretation is that it's similar to the reward of Qiyamul Layl, of praying at night. So yakfihi, it's enough for him, meaning it's as if you've prayed the whole night. So it's enough of thawab to read these verses at night. So these are 2 opinions. Either to protect you from the harm of the night, or it's like you have the reward of praying at night. And it's half a page, the last 2 verses of Al-Baqarah.
زو كسو آخر سورة البقرة لآخر زو آمن الرسول بذال إلى آخر زو الزوم رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام يذكر أورت ليوك حل بايو بايتي بزديج حديث حل حديثهم علماء كوتا بفسروا حد قرب علماء الزو أورت بيور يديزل قصص تشي تمام بيم حل الزو ليوك حل زايشم حلو ألاي قرب علماء الزو أورتي بي يعني عليه صلاة السجدة يرزوزو يبي رخبة زي الأجر يوك حل زايشم حلو بايتين كوت أينو قبي يعني سفيسران تبايتين يعني ينفع البيت زو أو زو أورت اللي يوك حل بايت زو.
That's also recited at night. So once Maghrib comes in, you can read them. Or before you go to sleep if you want. I can't help myself. I have to do one more thing you should read every day, if you'll allow me. Is the last 11 verses of Surah Al-Imran when you wake up in the morning. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ to the end. It's a page and a half. So the last 11 verses of Al-Imran when you wake up, this is what the Prophet used to do every morning when he woke up. Alayhi wa alayhi salatu wassalam. So every morning when you wake up, read the last 11 verses of Al-Imran. So it's suitable to memorize it. Because if you wake up, you don't have wudu, right? So suitable to memorize it, inshallah. It's a page and a half, won't take you that long. So that's the last thing I want to mention.
الزوج سؤال عمران
Last 11. 190 to 200. Verses 190 to 200.
آخر الصراحة آياتاتو صوزة قراءة نارا قريم رسول عليه الصلاة والسلام يقرأ زنارانتا يم بجيح فايدة زالبان تابع كل ما صوزة قراءة نارا
Allahu a'lam wa ahkam. Allah knows best. Yes, we have a number of announcements. The announcements are almost as long as the lesson I just gave, mashallah. So we have a few announcements and then we'll stop. First thing is Al-Fatiha with 3 intentions. One, for a brother who passed away, Al-Hajj Walid Salah ad-Din Al-Barazi. Al-Fatiha for him, he passed away. There's one sister who is sick, also for her. And also for a sister who passed away, Nuria Hajj Mubarak. So Al-Fatiha for these 2 who passed away and one who's sick, inshallah. So that's the first thing. اللهم أوصل ثواب ما قرأناه إلى روح سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإلى روح الحاج وليد صلاح الدين البرازي الحاج وليد صلاح الدين البرازي وإلى روح نوريا حاج مبارك وإلى سائر أموات المسلمين إن شاء الله. That's the first thing. The second thing, lost and found. We have $20. I mean, there's another way of doing this, but oh well. The $20 was dropped by someone in the ladies area. So ladies, if someone is missing $20, we'll trust that you'll be honest and claim it if it's yours. If it's not, don't. And then $5 was lost at Jumu'ah yesterday. So if you lost $5 at Jumu'ah, you can claim it here, inshallah. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Also, next announcement is daylight saving time will start at 2 a.m. So tomorrow the clocks change. It goes ahead 1 hour. So there's that. Next announcement, there is a GoFundMe page that has been set up for AICP Toronto. So you can use that as one way to donate your funds, inshallah. Also, there is a Ramadan Quran recitation contest that will be happening, and the registration is now open. Who has the rules for this competition? Quran recitation, so kids just come and recite, or is it based on memorization? Details to follow, inshallah. There's a contest that will be held, so for kids who want to participate, inshallah, you can register. So that's a good activity for the kids, inshallah, and it'll make the parents happy, inshallah, to see their kids reciting in Ramadan. And 2 more. So Ramadan is about 3 weeks away, right? About 3 weeks away. Nisf of Sha'ban, the 15th of Sha'ban will be on Friday. So the night, which is Thursday night, the eve of Friday, is one of religiously the holiest nights of the year, one of the most important nights of the year. Mentioned in the hadith explicitly, the Prophet said, spend its night awake in prayer, and spend its day fasting. So it's sunnah to fast on the 15th of Sha'ban, which will be again Friday. And it's sunnah to spend the night before doing acts of obedience, of ta'ah. So pray some sunnah, make some dua, read some Quran, inshallah. So that'll be Thursday night is a Nisf of Sha'ban, the 15th night. So you fast on Friday, inshallah. And we ask that you donate for the Ramadan iftar that will be had Fridays and Saturdays, inshallah, for sure. And beyond that, be on the lookout for some announcements. Allahu a'lam wa ahkam. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Make tahleel. The money will be here for those who want to claim it. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. وجزا الله محمد عنا خيرا. And Surah Al-Furqan, Allah tells us that on Judgment Day the Prophet will complain about his own nation. وقال الرسول يا ربي إن قومي اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا. The Prophet will say, "Oh my Lord, my nation has taken or has abandoned the Quran. اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا. They've abandoned the Quran." So the Prophet will complain on Judgment Day about this nation for the nation basically leaving the Quran. So not reciting it, and also in addition to not reciting it, it's not living it, because the Quran commands you to do the good and tells you to avoid the haram. So the Prophet will mention on Judgment Day in complaining to his Lord that us, his nation, اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا. So one of the reasons why I mention these things is because it's important for the Muslim to have a connection with Kitabullah, right? So that's why I mentioned these chapters that you should read daily. If you don't have a habit of reciting something daily, then this is one place you can start. Have these chapters that are important to read on a daily basis. Al-Kahf every Friday, everybody knows that. So that's another one you can add to your list. But these four, Al-Mulk, Yasin, and Tabarak, everyone knows about that. Add Al-Waqi'ah, inshallah, and Al-Sajda. And so this is what I wanted to mention, the importance of the Muslim being connected to Kitabullah and reciting from it on a daily basis. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. That's all I want to say.